Today is the 17th of September. Today is my wife's birthday. It is also my birthday. You're much too kind. You should never applaud for anyone until you hear what they have to say. You know, when I stop and I review my life, I look back and I recall I was born during the Second World War, and my parents couldn't hire any help, and so my mother and father were milking the cows. We had the largest dairy in the state of Montana. Well, now, back then there was no such thing as kindergarten. There's no such thing as daycare. My daycare was working in the garden. My first job, putting my hands in real live living soil. I loved it. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I knew before I ever went to school, I knew what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I wanted to be a farmer. What a no-brainer. I wanted to be a farmer. My parents owned a farm. I could go to school 12 years. I didn't do anything but party and play football. 12 years, I never took a book home. I never studied. Believe it or not, my senior year, they came to me and they said, "Lyman, you're going to graduate." Almost had the big one right there. But I figured it out. They looked at it and they said, "Well, you know, as dumb as this guy is, we don't graduate him, he'll come back." They didn't want to take a chance on that, and so I went home to that farm. That farm, I knew I wanted to be a farmer. I thought I was on top of the game. I went home and I found that farm was a business to be run. I didn't have the tools to run a business. I was dumber than a post. Well, I figured that out. I immediately decided to go on to the university. I went to Montana State University because I wanted to be one of those smart, educated farmers. I went to Montana State and I learned about herbicides, pesticides, hormones, and medication. I soaked up that information like a sponge because I was going to go home and I was going to build an agribusiness. Couldn't spell it, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. I went home to that one-horse farm, that organic farm, and I said to my father, I said, "Move over, Pop. I'm going to take this one-horse farm and I'm going to turn it into an agribusiness." And he looked at me and he said, "What the hell is that?" I said, "We need to start using those herbicides, pesticides, hormones, medication. I mean, we got to get into the new century." My father said, "You are wrong." But I couldn't see it. And so I did it my way. I built an operation where I had 7,000 head of cattle, 30 employees, 20 tractors. I thought I was the Donald Trump of agriculture. I can't tell you what a thrill it was. The first time I wrote a check for $1 million and it didn't bounce, I thought, man, I have arrived. And then I got the wake-up call. I ended up paralyzed from the waist down. The doctor said to me, he said, "It appears that you have a tumor on your spinal cord. So if that tumor is on the inside of the cord, you have less than 1 chance in 1 million you will ever walk again." I'll tell you, 7,000 head of cattle doesn't mean anything. You think of your wife, your kids, and you wonder, what kind of an invalid am I going to be? Am I going to sit in a wheelchair and feel sorry for myself? Or can I actually do something that's worthwhile? What's that thing that's worthwhile? I didn't know. I knew that when I was a kid working in the garden, we had birds and trees and living soil. After my chemical sojourn on the farm, I saw the birds dry, the trees die. I saw the soil change, and it wasn't until I was paralyzed that I was willing to admit it was my fault. I was the one that did it. I was the one that decided to use all of that. And so I go in to the operation, and the only thing I can think of, one chance in a million, I'll be in a wheelchair. But going into the operation, I couldn't feel the foot of the bed. And so I thought, well, there's a chance, possibility. I'll tell you what I'll do. The first thing I'll do when I wake up from the operation is I'll see whether I can feel the foot of the bed. I'm not going to tell anybody. I go into the operation. It's hours long. I wake up in the recovery room, and the first thing I heard was the nurse was saying to me, Mr. Lyman, you have to move up in the bed. And I told her there will never be a day like that, because I could feel the foot of the bed. Why? Why in the world? Why in the world was I given the opportunity of a 1 in a million? Why? Maybe I couldn't walk, but I could feel. And if that's the case, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to do what I did before? Kill more soil, kill more trees, kill more birds? I didn't know what to do. Had some time recovering, and I thought about a lot of things, and I thought, maybe the thing that makes the most sense is maybe we should become organic farmers. Could we see if we could get the farm back to what it was when I was a kid? I went and saw the banker, and I said to the banker, I said, I need to borrow some money. He says, well, there's nothing new there. He says, what are you going to do with it? I said, I want to become an organic farmer. My banker looks at me and he laughs. He says, you want me to lend you money? And you're not going to spend it with my other customers, the chemical dealer, the pharmaceutical dealer, the fertilizer dealer? He said, there will never be a day like that. And so I sold my farm. I paid my debts. I started working with other farmers not to make the mistakes that I made. And I got a call one day and they said, how would you like to go to Washington, D.C. and work on Capitol Hill? Wow. 535 members of Congress. I just absolutely knew they wanted to do what was right. I went to Washington, D.C. I worked 5 years on Capitol Hill. And I'll tell you right now, the solution to our problems will never come from Washington, D.C. Hey, come back. Just because he wants to applaud, don't leave him out. That's okay.
Oh, we know.
I hope you realize that there is more good that has happened in the world from the making of the COWSPIRACY movie than ever came out of Washington, D.C. or ever will. We are in the most critical period of time in human history. We're going to determine whether the Homo sapiens species continues to inhabit planet Earth or not, and most of that will be done in your lifetime. You know, I started out in this, I thought, you know, here I was, Washington, D.C., I weigh well over 300 pounds. My blood pressure is sky high. My cholesterol's over 300. I'd sit down and my nose would bleed. I knew I had a problem. And I thought, I ought to do something about this. And I heard about vegetarian diet. And I thought, here I am. I'm working for a farm organization. And I'm thinking about becoming a vegetarian. Well, I did the smart thing. I became a closet vegetarian. I lost some weight, my blood pressure came down, my cholesterol came down, and I thought, wow, if doing that will give you that kind of results, only a damn fool wouldn't become a vegan. And so I became a vegan. I became a vegan. My cholesterol went from over 300 to 115. I lost over 100 pounds. My blood pressure went from sky high to normal. Well, you know me. I got a big mouth and I started telling people about it. Not a real good idea working for a farm organization. So I go to work for Jeremy Rifkin. He wrote a book that's called No More Beef. And I thought, wow, that's a good idea. And that's where I started down the path of activism, where I started talking, where I started traveling. And in the years, 18 years on the road, many of those years over 100,000 miles, never, hardly ever stayed in a hotel or a motel. I stayed with people. I slept on their floors. I used to be crazy. I can remember and went to Texas one time. I was supposed to speak at the auditorium in the high school. But lo and behold, they were remodeling the auditorium, and so they said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put as many people as will fit in any room we have, and you can speak as often as you want throughout the day. No problem. They said, how often do you want to speak? I said, how many classes do you have? They said 9. I said, I'll do them all. Wow. Dumbest thing I ever did in my life. I will tell you, doing 9 classes, one right after another, after a while you didn't know what you told the last one or the next one. But some of the groups were extremely large. 25,000 at Earth Day in Canada. Salt Lake City, we had a group and 4 showed up. I think 2 of them became vegan. So percentage-wise, that one worked the best. But the interesting thing was the people that I met. the people that I slept on their floors, the ones that I met, and we were able to talk about what they wanted to do and how they could impact what was going on. And remember, this is back in the days when you'd get on an airplane and they actually had meals. I mean, you could pre-order a vegan meal on an airplane. You couldn't get it, but you could order it. But we've come a long way. You can't imagine, of all of the movements in the world, whether we talk about slavery or women having the right to vote or civil rights, if we talk about all of the movements, nothing in the world is moving at a faster pace than the issue of diet. And you know why? Because diet is the driving force of global climate change. There is nothing in the world, not all of the cars, buses, and tractors, not all of the smokestacks, nothing puts more detrimental gas into the environment than what we are eating. Now, there's a lot of people that they don't want to face up to that. You know, you can talk to them about a lot of things. You can even call their mother-in-law bad names. But you start talking about something as elemental as what they're eating, all of a sudden they think that you are crazy because you're talking about them actually making a change. You know, they thought writing a check to the Sierra Club, that would do it. The Sierra Club will take care of it. Or maybe another organization, maybe the Humane Society, they'll make it happen. Just write another check. Don't change what you're doing. But it doesn't work. You know, nature does not negotiate. Nature will take a lot of abuse. But in the end, nature will always win. She has showed us time after time. I'm going to tell you about a few times that nature actually showed the human race what they should or should not be doing. Did we learn anything from them? Apparently not. But how about Second World War? We put a small detachment of military on St. Matthew's Island up off of the coast of Alaska. 144 square miles. But if they could not resupply those men, they would starve to death. And so they thought, and they said, well, what we'll do, it's the perfect environment for reindeer. We'll take 29 reindeer, we'll put them there, and if we can't resupply that military detachment, they will have something to eat and they will be able to survive. 1943. Never came the time that they couldn't resupply them. They never had to harvest any of the reindeer. The reindeer were thrilled to death. 29 reindeer, not a predator. It was like reindeer heaven. Those 29 reindeer, by the time they left in 1944, they were happy, fat, and they thought they were in the perfect place for reindeer. They went back and visited those reindeer 20 years later in about 1965. Those 19 reindeer had increased slightly. They had gone from 29 to 6,000. Thick, 1,000 fat, happy reindeer. They thought there was nothing in the world better than living on St. Matthew's Island. And so they waved goodbye to the reindeer and left. And 20 years later, they came back, and guess what? There was not one live reindeer on St. Matthew's Island. They could not continue to reproduce at the rate they were reproducing and end up with the same area to graze. And what they ended up doing is they ate the island right into the rock. And they all died. And you say, well, that's reindeer. You know, people are smarter than that. People wouldn't do something like that, would they? How about Easter Island? There's not a person in here that has not seen the large carved monuments sitting on the beach of Easter Island. But you know, the amazing thing is, no one lives on Easter Island. At one time, it was a thriving place. They ended up with trees and boats and gardens, and they were living the life of Riley. And the thing about it is, the stature you had on Easter Island was carving the bigger monument and sledding it down to the beach than the person before and standing it up. And every time that would happen, the adulation for that person would be unbounded. Well, there were some stowaways that came to Easter Island, and there were rats. Nobody really cared. The rats were not bothering the human food supply. They were eating the seeds off of the palm trees. The people weren't eating them. They didn't care. They kept chopping down the trees, sledding down the monuments to the beach, standing them up. And all of a sudden they looked around and said, wow, there are no new trees. What happened to the trees? Oh, well, you know, who cares? Let's just do a bigger monument. We'll sled it down. And they cut down the last tree, and they slid the big monument down to the beach, and they stood it up. And without trees, there were no more boats. And without boats, there were no more fish. And then, without the nuts from the palm trees, the rats started eating the human food. And guess what? If we today go to Easter Island and dig up the dump of Easter Island, you know what we find? Human bones with human teeth marks. They ended up with cannibalism because that was the only thing left to eat. And there ended up to be no people left on Easter Island. Why? Why should we not understand that? Why should we not know that nature was showing us exactly what was going on? We have some of the finest examples of early irrigation in the southwest U.S., and it was put in there by a group of people that were called Anastasis. And the Anastasis put in the irrigation system that is used almost exactly today of what it was thousands of years ago. The Anastasis, they knew nothing about conservation. They knew about irrigation. They knew about growing their food. And they kept cutting down the trees, using it for their irrigation system, and that they didn't use to irrigate, they used for firewood. And the trip to get a tree kept getting to be further and further. They actually, here recently, went to some of the old Anastasi irrigation system, took the logs, and were able to determine that those logs came from over 100 miles away. Can you imagine the people carrying those logs on their backs over 100 miles for their irrigation system? Well, the Anastasies disappeared. Everybody wants to say, oh, well, we don't know where they went. We go to the dump. We dig up the bones. What do we find? Human bones with human teeth marks. The Anastasies ended up eating each other because they could not understand the message that nature was sending to them. You can use the wood, but you need to replace it. Have we learned that lesson? Do we have organizations that are out there beating the drum and saying, you give us your membership money and we're going to talk to the members of Congress about nature does not negotiate? No. We didn't learn a damn thing. And if we're going to make a change, where is it going to come from? Is it going to come from Congress? Is it going to come from politicians? Is it going to come from the governor? Or is it going to come from the people? Here we are. We have the grandest group of folks you could ever ask for sitting right here. There's not one of you here that does not have more skills than I did when I started. There's not a one of you here that cannot make a change. And you stop and look at it and you say, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm just one person. Do you realize that every great movement in the world always started with one person? Do you remember Gandhi? Gandhi was in South Africa. He was a lawyer. And he went to defend his first case in court, and he did so bad that he ran out of court crying. He went back to India, and he said to his friends, he said, you know, India should be free. We should get rid of England. And everybody laughed, and they laughed. And so Gandhi, he goes to see the High Commissioner that represents the Queen, and he walks in and to get up dressed like a diaper, and he basically says to the High Commissioner, he says, sir, it is time for you to go home. And the High Commissioner looks at this guy standing in front of him, and he can't believe it. He says, Mr. Gandhi, how many troops do you have? Gandhi said, I have no troops. The High Commissioner says, well, I'm part of the empire, and we have the largest army in the world. We have the largest navy in the world. How are you going to get us to go home? And Gandhi said, it's simple. It is time for you to go home. The High Commissioner calls his guards and throws Gandhi out. Gandhi gets his supporters, and they march to the salt works. No guns, no clubs, no army. And the English army is standing there, and Gandhi lines his people up and walks them up and allows the soldiers to club them till they're unconscious. They drag those away, and more come up. And day after day, it's exactly what happened. More and more and more people. And finally, the soldiers said to their officers, enough is enough. These people believe what they are about. We should stop what we're doing. And sure enough, the English went home. And you know why? Because Gandhi had an issue whose time was right. How about us? If there was ever the opportunity in the world, almost half of the world today understands that we have global climate change. Almost half of the people on the planet. The others are in Congress. But you know, when you stop and think about it, the one thing about global climate change that we can do something about is what we eat. My wife and I, in a few months, will be married 49 years. I will tell you that I married much better than she did. She married me as a reclamation project. And it's been ongoing for almost 49 years. But you know, we've been vegan now for 25 years, she and I. I go to my high school class reunion, Great Falls, Montana. I am the only vegan that has ever graduated from Great Falls High School. I'm sure of that. I walk into my class reunion. Do you think anybody wants to talk to me about my diet? No. Almost 1 out of every 3 members of my graduating class has died. You never saw so many canes, crutches, and walkers in all of your life. Nobody wants to talk about my diet till I go to the bathroom. I walk into the bathroom and some clown comes up to me and says, "You ever sneak out for a burger?" No. But you look at it and you say, how do you change people like that? Maybe I'll get on the corner. I'll stand on the corner. I'll scream at people when they go by, "Be vegan." You will get the 1-finger salute. That's not going to work. So I'll tell you what we'll do. Get an opportunity. Go on the Oprah show. Oprah called me up and said, "How would you like to come on the show? We have a few million people that watch it." Well, I didn't want her to think that I was, overly enthusiastic, so I waited good 3 or 4 seconds before I agreed. I flew to Chicago. Believe this. No, old farm boy, I fly to Chicago, I get off the plane, I'm walking down the runway, I'm carrying my suit. I have a suit. I'm carrying a suit, and here's a guy with a sign, and the sign says, "Lyman." Wow. I go up to him and I said, "You wait 5 minutes so I can find somebody with a camera. I'd like to take a picture of this." He said no. Took me down to the hotel. I tell you, I ended up with a voucher. And I was so proud of the voucher, I didn't use it because I wanted it as a memory for speaking on the Oprah show. Next morning, I'm up, I got my suit on. I go down and they send a limo, and a limo picks me up and takes me to Harpo Productions. I walk in the door and there's Oprah. I thought, oh my God, I wonder what this is going to be like. So I'm out on the stage, and I'm sitting on the stage, and I'll tell you, I'm a little nervous. But I thought, my wife, she told me before I went, she says, "Don't do anything stupid." I'm sitting there wondering, is there a comma in that sentence or not? Before I can figure that out, here comes Oprah. And Oprah says, here's a man, used to be a cattleman. He's going to talk to us about feeding cows to cows. So I go on the show and I tell Oprah about grinding up cows and feeding them to cows. You know, that we've taken a cow that's an absolute herbivore, and we not only turn them into carnivores, we've turned them into cannibals. And Oprah says, that just stops me cold. I will never again eat a burger. Well, when the show was over, I go up to Oprah and I said, hey, Oprah, give me 5 minutes. I'll get you off a chicken. She says, only one animal a day. Well, you know, I felt pretty good about the show. I didn't say anything that I thought was stupid. Went along pretty good. I went about my business, and I got a call and said, do you realize you're being sued along with Oprah Harpo Production for $180 million? Wow, I don't have $180 million. But, you know, I had to go home and talk to my wife, and she said, how'd it go, honey? I said, oh, it was great. I really enjoyed it. And she said, well, I haven't had any real bad comments about it. I said, she says, what was that? I said, well, there's some Texas cattlemen that are going to sue us, you know. She says, they're going to what? I said, there's a group of Texan cattlemen that are going to sue us for $180 million. She says, that means they would take everything we've got. I said, yeah, but we don't have much. So I go to Texas, Amarillo, Texas. Not the end of the world, but it's clearly visible from there. We end up spending 6 weeks in court in Amarillo, Texas. We win. We win on the right of free speech. The cattlemen sue us again. We win again. They sue us again. We win again. 4 times they sued us, 4 times we win, and finally the judge throws out the case with prejudice, which means they cannot refile the case. Remember, I started out a cattleman. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was going to do. All I knew was follow my heart. I did what each and every person in this room knows and can do. Follow your heart. You know what's right. You know if we keep doing what we're doing right now, it is not going to work. There is not going to be a future for our children and grandchildren. What else can we do? One person can make a difference. Always has, always will. But remember, when you do this, do not point at somebody and say, let me tell you what you ought to eat. It won't work. You can see their eyes roll up. What you want to do is say, let me tell you what a damn fool I was. They will believe that in a heartbeat. But remember, 80% of the American people are brain dead. 80% of people, you couldn't tell them it was wet in a hurricane. What you want to do is remember that there's only 20% of the American people that are thinking. You want to spend your time and effort educating the people that are thinking. When the 20% of the people that are thinking understand where we're going and what it's all about, they will go, the 80% will follow. We cannot lose if we go and do what we can do. Look at what happened when they made a documentary. Two guys have an idea of what they're going to do. They have no money. They don't know how they're going to do it. They don't know where they're going to go. They don't know what's going to be in it, but they know they're going to do something. And they did. And how many hundreds of thousands and millions of people have seen that? Remember, every seed you ever plant in a mind never disappears. It always is there. It always is growing. Go out and become the Johnny Appleseed of the vegan movement because of global climate change. Half of the people are already receptive in the world. There is nothing that cannot be done if you are willing to do what you can do. You look at it and say, if that damn lame farmer can go out and do something like that, there is no doubt I can do better. And I believe that to be true. Join with me. Let's go change the world, and let's do it one bite at a time. Thank you very much.